During our third anniversary dinner, Eli casually mentioned that our credit cards were maxed out when I brought up taking a dream vacation. It felt like a punch to the gut. We had always been careful with money, so hearing this caught me completely off guard. "What do you mean the cards are maxed out?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Eli shrugged nonchalantly. "It's no big deal, babe. I've just been hitting the casino a little harder than usual lately, but it's under control." My mind was racing. How could he have racked up so much debt without me knowing? And gambling? That was a side of him I'd never seen before. Over the next few days, I dug deeper into our finances. The truth was even worse than I'd imagined. Eli had taken out multiple credit cards and loans, all to fuel his gambling addiction. We were hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. When I confronted him, he broke down, admitting everything. He had been struggling with a gambling problem for over a year, and had been too ashamed to tell me. The tears streaming down his face almost made me feel sorry for him. Almost. "We have to file for bankruptcy," I said, my voice shaking with anger and disappointment. "There's no other way out of this mess." Eli shook his head adamantly. "No, there's another option. My brother Cal. We can transfer the house to his name temporarily. That way, it's protected from the creditors until I can get back on my feet." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You want to lie to your own brother and risk losing our home?" "Absolutely not." But Eli was relentless, begging and pleading until I finally caved. I knew it was a terrible idea, but I was desperate to save our marriage and finances. Little did I know, it was just the beginning of Eli's betrayal. Despite my reservations, I went through with Eli's plan to temporarily transfer our house to his brother Cal's name. I tried to convince myself that he was doing this to protect our assets, that it really was just a short-term solution until he got back on his feet. When we met with Cal and his wife Darcy to explain the situation, I could barely look them in the eye. Eli did most of the talking, spinning his web of lies about needing to protect our home from creditors while he sorted out some business issues. "I don't understand," Darcy said, her brow furrowed with concern. "Why do you need to put the house in Cal's name? Can't you just file for bankruptcy?" Eli flashed her his most charming smile. "It's just a temporary measure, sweetheart. We'll have everything sorted out in a few months, and then we'll transfer it right back. You don't need to worry your pretty little head about it." I cringed at his condescending tone, but Darcy seemed to accept his explanation. Cal, however, looked uneasy. He pulled me aside while Eli and Darcy chatted in the other room. "You sure about this, Rowan?" he asked, his voice low. "It seems a little shady, even for my brother." I forced a smile, trying to quell the growing knot of doubt in my stomach. "It'll be fine, Cal. Just a few months, and then everything will be back to normal." Famous last words. Over the next few weeks, Eli's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He was gone for days at a time, claiming he was working on sorting out our financial mess. When he was home, he was irritable and distant, snapping at me over the smallest things. One night, as he stumbled in well past midnight, reeking of booze and perfume that wasn't mine, I knew the truth. He was having an affair. I confronted him, and he didn't even try to deny it. "What did you expect, Rowan?" He slurred, his words laced with venom. "You think I was going to stay faithful to a pathetic, nagging wife like you?" In that moment, I realized I had made the biggest mistake of my life by trusting him. But I also knew that I couldn't just roll over and let him destroy me. It was time to fight back. After Eli's drunken confession about his affair, I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Not only had he lied about our finances and put our home at risk, but he had also betrayed our marriage vows in the most despicable way. In a daze, I spent the next few days trying to piece together what to do next. I consulted with a lawyer, hoping there was a way out of this mess. But the news was grim. Because we had transferred the house to Cal's name, and with Eli's extensive debts, I had very limited options. "The best thing you can do is try to gather as much evidence as possible," the lawyer advised. "Proof of his financial misdeeds, the affair, anything that can help build a case against him." So that's what I did. I became a private investigator in my own life, documenting every lie, every shady transaction, every sign of Eli's infidelity. I even managed to get copies of his credit card statements, revealing just how deep his gambling addiction ran. Meanwhile, Eli continued to spiral out of control. He was gone more nights than not, coming home reeking of booze and another woman's perfume. I stopped asking where he'd been or trying to reason with him. It was clear he was too far gone. The one bright spot in this whole mess was my newfound friendship with Darcy. As Cal's wife, she had been just as blindsided by Eli's schemes as I was. We bonded over our shared sense of betrayal, and she became my confidant, helping me gather evidence and offering a shoulder to cry on. "I can't believe Cal was mixed up in all of this," she said one day, shaking her head in disbelief. "He's always been the responsible one." I squeezed her hand, understanding her pain all too well. Eli has a way of manipulating people. He fooled us both. As the weeks passed, my anger towards Eli only grew stronger, not just for what he had done to me, but for dragging his own brother into his web of lies. Cal and Darcy didn't deserve to be collateral damage in his selfish quest for self-destruction. That's when I started to formulate a plan. I was done being the victim. It was time for Eli to face the consequences of his actions, and I was going to make sure he paid for every single lie. As the weeks dragged on, Eli's behavior only grew more erratic and destructive. He was rarely home, and when he was either passed out drunk or raging about something inconsequential. I started staying with Darcy more often than not, just to avoid his toxic presence. "You can't keep living like this," Darcy said one night as we split a bottle of wine on her patio. "He's going to drag you down with him if you're not careful." I took a long sip, the bitter liquid burning my throat. "I know. Believe me, I want out of this marriage more than anything. But he's made it impossible for me to leave." Darcy's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean? Surely there's a way to divorce his sorry ass and get your house back." Shaking my head, I explained how Eli had me transfer the deed to Cal, making it nearly impossible for me to claim ownership again. As the words left my mouth, I could see the realization dawn on Darcy's face. "That son of a bitch," she hissed. "He used my husband too. Oh, he is going to pay for this." In that moment, I felt a renewed sense of determination. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for Darcy and Cal too. For the first time in months, I felt like I had an ally in my corner, someone who understood the depth of Eli's betrayal. Over the next few weeks, Darcy and I became co-conspirators, gathering every shred of evidence we could find against Eli. Bank statements, credit card bills, phone records, nothing was off limits. We built a mountain of proof detailing his reckless gambling, his affair, and his financial deceit. "We're going to nail that bastard to the wall," Darcy vowed, her voice steely with resolve. I believed her. With each new piece of evidence we uncovered, I could feel the shackles of Eli's control loosening. I was no longer a helpless victim. I was a woman on a mission for justice. The final straw came when I stumbled across a receipt for an expensive piece of jewelry, clearly a gift for his mistress. As I stared at the damning slip of paper, something inside me snapped. I was done being the scorned wife, crying in the shadows while Eli flaunted his infidelity. It was time to burn his world to the ground. It was the perfect opportunity, a big family gathering at Cal and Darcy's house for Darcy's birthday. Eli would be there, smug and oblivious as ever. But this time, I was ready for him. As everyone gathered in the backyard, laughing and making small talk, I caught Eli's eye from across the lawn. He gave me a mocking smirk, raising his beer in a mock salute. My blood boiled, but I forced a smile in return. This was all part of the plan. Once we were all settled around the patio table, I cleared my throat loudly, drawing everyone's attention. "Before we start eating, I have something to share with all of you," I announced, my voice surprisingly steady. "Something you all deserve to know." Eli shot me a warning glare, but I pressed on. "For months now, my husband has been lying to us. To all of us." I turned to Cal and Darcy, feeling a pang of guilt for what I was about to reveal. "He manipulated you into putting our house in your name, Cal, all because he's drowning in debt from his gambling addiction." Gasps rippled through the gathering as I laid out the evidence. Bank statements, credit card bills, everything Darcy and I had painstakingly gathered. Eli's face turned a mottled shade of red, but I didn't stop there. "And if that wasn't enough," I continued, "he's also been carrying on an affair for months now. With some cheap mistress, he's been showering with expensive gifts bought with money he doesn't even have." I held up the damning jewelry receipt, letting it do the talking. Eli jumped to his feet, spewing denials and curses, but no one was listening. The truth was out in the open, laid bare for everyone to see. Cal looked like he'd been punched in the gut, while Darcy was practically trembling with rage. The rest of the family just stared in stunned silence, unable to process the depth of Eli's betrayal. Through it all, I remained stoic, allowing the evidence to speak for itself. When I was finished, I turned to Eli, meeting his hate-filled glare with an icy calm. "You're done ruining my life," I said, my voice low but laced with steel. "It's over. You've lost everything." To his credit, Eli didn't go down without a fight. He ranted and raved, hurling insults and accusations like a cornered animal. But in the end, it didn't matter. The truth was out and there was no walking it back. As the party dispersed in stunned silence, I felt an unexpected sense of peace wash over me. The weight I'd been carrying for months had finally lifted, and in that moment, I knew I'd won. Eli could rage and bluster all he wanted, but his games were over. He'd lost control, and there was no getting it back. Not this time. After the explosive reveal at Darcy's birthday party, the legal battle began in earnest. With Cal's support and testimony, I hired a shark of a lawyer to take Eli down once and for all. The first order of business was getting the house back in my name. My lawyer made a strong case that the transfer to Cal had been done under false pretenses and coercion by Eli. To my relief, the judge agreed. Eli's lies and manipulation were undeniable given the mountain of evidence we presented. Mr. Grayson clearly had no intention of this being a temporary measure. The judge stated sternly, his actions were a deliberate attempt to defraud his wife and conceal assets from creditors. The property will be returned to Mrs. Grayson's name immediately. I had to fight back tears of relief as the gavel came down. After months of feeling trapped and hopeless, I finally had my home, my security back. But we weren't done yet. Not by a long shot. The next phase was going after Eli for his various financial crimes, the hidden debts, the shady loans, even his gambling losses. My lawyer was relentless, digging up every shred of evidence to bury him. During one particularly heated court session, Eli's lawyer tried to paint me as a vindictive, scorned wife out for revenge. He might as well have been speaking Greek for all the good it did him. "Your client is a con man and a liar who systematically robbed his wife of her financial security to fuel his vices," my lawyer fired back, his voice booming in the courtroom. "He has no one to blame but himself for the consequences of his reprehensible actions." Eli shot me a venomous glare from across the room, but I simply met his gaze with an icy stare. He had no power over me anymore. In the end, the judge saw right through Eli's desperate attempts at playing the victim. He was found guilty on multiple counts of fraud, financial crimes, and concealing assets. Not only would he face potential jail time, but he was also ordered to pay me a hefty settlement, one that would ensure I never had to worry about money again. As we walked out of the courthouse that final day, Eli brushed past me, his expression a mask of pure hatred. "You're going to regret this," he hissed under his breath. "You haven't seen the last of me." I simply laughed in his face. "I already have everything I want, Eli. You've got nothing left to take from me." Finally free of his toxic grasp, I could breathe again. The long, dark tunnel of our marriage was finally behind me, and the future looked brighter than ever. Eli could make all the empty threats he wanted. He was a ghost of the past, a cautionary tale of how low a person could sink. As for me, I was just getting started on the rest of my life. In the aftermath of my legal victory over Eli, everything seemed to crumble around him at lightning speed. It was almost dizzying to watch. First, his mistress caught wind of the whole sordid affair and dropped him like a bad habit. Apparently, she wasn't too keen on being with a broke, disgraced loser after all. Who would have thought? Then the professional fallout began. Eli had worked in real estate, and word travels fast in that world. As soon as the details of his fraud and deception hit the news, no reputable agency would touch him with a 10-foot pole. His career was essentially over before it could really begin. Meanwhile, I was just getting started on rebuilding my life without his toxic presence weighing me down. With the generous settlement from the court case, I was able to pay off what remained of Eli's debt and still had plenty left over. Cal and Darcy were incredibly supportive throughout everything. I'll never forget the day Darcy showed up at my door with a bottle of champagne and the biggest grin on her face. "We're throwing you a party," she announced, "to celebrate you getting that scumbag out of our lives for good." The party ended up being a total rager, with friends and family coming from all over to raise a glass to my fresh start. Even Cal's stoic demeanor couldn't hide his relieved smile as we clinked drinks. "I'm just glad that whole nightmare is over," he said. "You deserve so much better, Rowan." As I looked around at the smiling faces surrounding me, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. If it hadn't been for these amazing people having my back, I might never have found the strength to stand up to Eli. In the months that followed, I watched from the sidelines as Eli's life continued its downward spiral. More legal troubles and unpaid debts seemed to pile up by the week. He had burned every bridge and scorched every connection he'd once had. The worst punishment of all? Being forced to watch me actually thrive without him around. I could see it in his eyes whenever we encountered each other, that seething resentment that I had somehow won. But what he failed to realize was that I had already won the second I broke free from his toxic grip. The money, the house, all of that was just icing on the cake. After years of lying and cheating, Eli had nobody left but himself. Poetic justice at its finest. As for me, I had everything I could ever want: my freedom, my independence, and a priceless support system of people who truly cared about me. With their encouragement, I even started exploring new career opportunities that I never would have considered before. It was like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders, allowing me to spread my wings and finally live life on my own terms, and I had no plans of letting anyone clip those wings ever again. The renovations on the house were finally complete, and I couldn't be more thrilled with how it turned out. It was like a physical manifestation of my new life. Out with the old, in with a fresh start. As I stepped back to admire the sleek new kitchen, with its modern appliances and marble countertops, I felt a surge of pride. This was my sanctuary, my clean slate. No more ghosts of the past lingering in every corner. "What do you think?" I asked Darcy, who had become my unofficial design consultant over the past few months. "Worth all the dust and noise?" She let out an appreciative whistle. "Girl, it looks amazing. You totally nailed the whole effortlessly chic vibe." Laughing, I pulled her in for a hug. If it hadn't been for Darcy's unwavering support, I'm not sure I would have made it through those dark days intact. She was the sister I never had, and I was eternally grateful. Over the next few weeks, I settled into my new surroundings like a bear emerging from hibernation. Every morning, I'd make a cup of coffee and just soak in the peaceful ambiance of my beautifully remodeled home. No more chaos, no more negativity, just serene tranquility. Of course, Eli tried to rear his ugly head a few times during the process. He'd show up unannounced, ranting about how I had stolen the house from him. More than once, I had to threaten to call the cops to get him to leave. "You think this is over?" He'd snarl, his face twisted with rage. "I'm going to make your life a living hell until you give me what's mine." I'll admit there were moments when his threats shook me, stirring up those old feelings of dread and anxiety. But they never lasted long. I had worked too hard to reclaim my power to let him slither his way back into my head. "This is my home, Eli," I stated calmly after one of his outbursts. "A home and a life that you gambled away through your own selfish actions. Whatever hell you're living in now, that's on you, buddy." Eventually, his attempts to terrorize me became less frequent until they stopped altogether. The last I heard, he had fled the state, likely to escape the mountain of debts and legal troubles still hounding him. Good riddance. As for me, my new life was just beginning. With the house situation settled and that dark chapter finally closed, I started exploring new career opportunities. I wasn't interested in just treading water anymore. I was ready to dive in headfirst and chase bigger dreams. A few months later, I landed an incredible marketing job at a prestigious firm in the city. It was a huge step up, with better pay and opportunities for growth. More importantly, it allowed me to flex my creativity and talent in ways I hadn't experienced in years. On my first day, as I settled into my bright, airy new office, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I'd come. From the depths of Eli's betrayal and despair, I had clawed my way back to take control of my own narrative. No more living in someone else's shadow, No more sacrificing my dreams and self-worth for a relationship built on lies. This was my life now, and I was going to live it to the fullest, on my own terms. The future was a blank canvas, and I held the brush. Whatever I chose to create, to build from those ashes of my past, was entirely up to me. And this time, there was no one to stop me.